Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to Jill Muller and all the organizers. It's been a pleasure to listen to Julia Schneider's talk, which introduces also the same topics I will be talking about. She was dealing with them in literature, in dystopian literature, but the violations of human rights, of women's rights, of people's rights are also to be found in real life, not only in dystopian literature, but as we all know, one can take a look at them in many ways. And it was very, very nice to hear Julia's reflection on the topics. In my case, today I will be introducing the philosophy of birth, a field that is growing in contemporary thought, and that it is for me a very vibrant or fascinating area of philosophy. I do philosophy of birth, and the way I explain this is very simple. Is, well, I use the tools of philosophy to analyze experiences of birth and practices around birth, that is birth care. And today I will practice how to introduce philosophy into the canon of subjects that are explored by philosophy. And for today's practice, I have chosen a particularly hot topic, obstetric violence. I don't know if you could hear the notion, obstetric violence, the violence that takes place, let's say, in labor room or around birth care facilities. Women, people in labor frequently have their rights breached during childbirth, during labor, and we need to know why this happens before we can fix it effectively. And what I would like to do is to address here how philosophy can help us understand how obstetric is and how we can help or contribute from philosophy to put it to an end. So in my talk, I will also unwrap my approach to the philosophy of birth. Different people do it differently. And in my case, I will be explaining what I understand is a new genealogy. And genealogy will be used literally. That is a new logos for Genos, a radical meditation on birth and origin. Let me see. Has it changed? Has the
Yes, it has changed, but it's very little. Can you make it bigger?
How is it going now?
Yeah, but then there's your screen is like half the page.
Go to slideshow. To slideshow.
At the white. No, white. Yeah, no, white.
The only ones that
yes, this one. Yeah, so perfect.
Okay, now sorry, but I need to do something then. Okay. Okay. So if you find the topics I will be talking interesting and you want to pursue research on them, you're welcome to get in touch. At Complutense University of Madrid, we have a program, a research project on the philosophy of birth, and we have different activities, and we welcome also academic visitors as well as expression of interest. So let's see at the end which kind of activities we are at the moment launching. Every human life, I just start, every human life begins with gestation and birth. However, in the thought and culture with which I am most familiar, which is currently or usually talked or named as Western philosophy, delivery and birth have received considerably less attention than death or mortality. But birth matters, and they matter philosophically too. In birth care, the area of birth care brings to the front fascinating philosophical questions like the following. Is a woman in labor? subject with full rights in practice as well as in theory? Can a laboring woman exercise her autonomy in that situation of extreme vulnerability, but also maximum lucidity or awareness that characterizes giving birth? What is the relation between agency, capacity, and pain during and between contractions? These kind of questions, key questions that relate to knowledge, to freedom, and to what it means to be a human are nonetheless. So for many years now, I have explored why and how we should introduce birth into the canon of subjects approached by philosophy. And many years ago, I coined the term philosophy of birth to kind of describe this area. This area is what I was doing in the sense of when I was talking to friends, I was saying, well, I do philosophy and I do philosophy around things that happen during birth. So I do philosophy of birth. Just nothing more important, but also nothing less important. At the moment, I consider philosophy of birth one of the key areas to deal with women's and people's human rights. How we understand our origin and practices that brings us into being reveal our humanity. That is what I believe. That's the conviction that lies under my work or my research. I think the lived experiences of birthing women and their situated knowledge challenge widely held assumptions about what it is rationality and about what it is to be a birthing woman, what it is to have agency and rationality or capacity in the delivery suite. The experiences are such that challenge the usual conceptions of a birthing woman. And in my research, I tried to analyze how much of birth care continues to underestimate the capacity of a woman in labor to behave rationally, that is, with reasons. This is how I use rationally, with reasons. With my approach to a philosophy of birth, I would like to offer a new genealogy that is a meditation on origin and birth that sets sail from a basic premise, which is that birthing subjects are fully entitled citizens and that their agency, autonomy, and capacity is to be acknowledged. So to construct this alternative genealogy, I first target obstetrics as an empirical and symbolic field of contemporary thought that reformulates the discourse on origin. For us, contemporary women, contemporary people, contemporary citizens, obstetrics is the science that talks about origin. There are other sciences or other discourses too, but obstetrics is one that really has influence in how we think of our origin. So my work identifies obstetrics as the science of origin that defines what it is to be human today. Understanding obstetrics is thus crucial to understanding genealogy nowadays and to analyze how birth care practices influence contemporary thought and broader ways of life. The term obstetric violence names the violence suffered mostly by women, but also their families, certainly their babies, in health settings during birth care. It refers to poor quality care that fails to adhere to evidence and values-based practice, medical practice. It refers to a systematic deprivation of women's right to autonomy. And it also refers to a phenomena that cannot be tackled or understood just by other legal terms that we have at hand, for example, abuse or disrespect or medical negligence. I would need more time to distinguish those, but what I want to emphasize is that the term obstetric violence has as one of its virtues the potential to emphasize that obstetric violence has a structural and a gender dimension. Also validates the lived experience of those who are subject to this kind of violence, including professionals who witness these practices. As other manifestations of gender violence, obstetric violence has only come to light in recent years. And it is thanks to decades of women's rights movements, human rights movements, birth rights movements, or activism that we have finally come to recognize its existence. And by we, I mention not only activists, scholars, academics, but especially institutions, ministries of health, and international bodies like United Nations. I will talk about it later on. That's what I mean by saying that we have finally come to acknowledge its existence. In the European context, I take it that most of us in the room are from the European context, but I know at least one is not, or might be debatable whether it is, but I could talk about globally, and I decided to talk here more of the European context. If you want more data, I can also give it. But in the European context, Spain is the only country that has acknowledged in its legislation the term obstetric violence, but it has only done so on the regional level. It's been completely impossible to move to the to have obstetric violence being acknowledged on a national legislation because of professional bodies, some professional bodies, and many health providers' rejection of its existence. But international bodies like the World Health Organization or United Nations or the Committee for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, the CEDAW, or the Council of Europe, or the European Parliament, amongst others, have already located obstetric violence at the axis of a human rights violation, a gender-based violence, and a clinical malpractice. Those are the three ways of understanding or going into the phenomenon. What it crosses is a human rights violation, gender-based violence, and medical or clinical malpractice. And these international bodies recommend to address obstetric violence as a systematic phenomenon, that is, one that takes place within a context of structural inequality, discrimination, and patriarchy. So let me just, for brevity's sake, describe some of the things that the United Nations or the Council of Europe say in their different resolutions. No, they say that human obstetric violence happens around the world and across socioeconomic levels. That's very important. It means that also here, and here can be my country, I am now in Spain, but here can also be Germany, where you are, and here means every country on the world. That is what it means, around the world. Around the world, in every country, obstetric violence takes place. And across socioeconomic levels, well, that we know. We know gender violence is not a characteristic of some women or some section society. It crosses societies. It crosses levels or classes or groups or yeah. Groups would be a good name. What I want to say is just that the obstetric violence is a intersectional and cross-dimensional phenomenon that we need to really bring to the front. the basic thing would be to remember it is a violation of human rights. What happens in the labor room? And I'm going to just go very, very quickly to an example that would explain how we think about what is going on in the labor room and whether we should reflect upon what we think. Within maternity care, within birth care, there is this fundamental problem, which is that while everybody is clear that choice, autonomy, and agency are fundamental in theory, and in the law they are acknowledged, in practice this is often, if not regularly, not enacted. So women's experiences, women's testimony speak to this uncomfortable truth, that autonomy in decision-making during labor is far from commonplace. So while the law grants our rights, the practice does not grant our rights. And what we need to understand is what the tension exactly is. What is this tension between theory and practice? Just the tension of, well, we just don't follow the law? I think it's something different what is going on here. Let me try to explain it. I think what is going on has to do with how we conceive female rationality and how we conceived women's rationality not taking place precisely or especially during labor, not being at play during labor. But at stake is nothing less than women's full citizenship. That's why I think it's crucial that we tackle this problem and what is going on. So here is just related to the same that I was seeing. So we can hear many testimonies, and I'm not bringing them here, that show this tension, that this surprise, that I cannot believe what happened. I would never have expected what happened. Of course, there are many good professionals that care and professionals who practice in high quality standards their professions. I am not talking of those situations. I'm talking about how and when obstetric violence takes place. So I believe philosophy is very valuable, very, very interesting to diagnose wrong assumptions, prejudices, stereotypes, or implicit biases that relate womb and reason, or that do not relate the work of womb or the uterus and the work of brains or mind, reason. That philosophy can challenge those toxic narratives that have on birth care. Because consciously or unconsciously, many health professionals engage in this kind of tension that women in labor are obviously not in full capacity. I was just talking to a group of anesthesiologists recently who were talking about women in labor having a vicious consent. If they would consent, if they would sign an informed consent sheet during labor, their consent would be vicious. Imagine the word. That shows is an example of the caution, the suspicion about how entitled we are to use our reasoning during in the labor room. Let's just summarize it like that. So this idea that women subject to uterine influence, to the use of the womb, women under contraction do not reason well, is what I would like to challenge. So it's about unveiling this stereotype. It is well known for people like us that philosophers have contested and underestimated women's capacity throughout the history of philosophy. And I'm not going to go into that, but this is really, really, really the core of what we are living at the moment. So the footprint of those narratives, of those historical narratives of estimation of our rationality, is what we experience nowadays, also in the labor room. Because it's about reason and reasons. Not only, but it's also about reason and reasons. What we should be talking about. The woman who during labor decides that, for example, she would like to stand up and move around is indeed rational, because to adopt an appropriate birth position, she might have evaluated the resources at hand and might just have decided, well, I should rather move instead of lie down. It's just an example, really, it doesn't matter. The point is that everyday philosophy calls that kind of reasoning practical reasoning, that is, reasoning to connect means towards ends. And it implies life experience. One needs to know a lot of things to be able to connect those means and ends. I usually mention that I'm always reminded of nature documentaries when they show chimpanzees piling up boxes to just get to a banana, and they describe that behavior as a proof of their cognitive ability. Chimpanzees are have cognitive abilities when they connect this kind of means towards an end. How is it that chimpanzees show that spark of intelligence when climbing on boxes, but a woman moving around during labor is simply following her animal instinct? This is the kind of comparison that we are to be not asking ourselves, because we probably ask those who provide birth care.
Can you come to an end, please?
To an end?
Yeah.
Okay, then I was about to say that a woman who shouts, screams during labor is usually understood as or taken as showing her instincts, while soldiers that shout, for example, in battle, are described as targeting, as really screaming for the sake of focusing. And I was also, or I am mentioning things about mourning, how screaming is allowed in certain rituals of mourning, while it is not allowed in other rituals. And that all to say that the language in which we conduct labor, the language we use to give birth, and scream is one of those languages, is a sign of, is interpreted as either a sign, a display of irrationality, or it can be showed or interpreted as a sign of, for example, a mantra or a tool towards relaxation, or towards or a way to open the vagina, or a way to relax and be able to push. So that in philosophy we are very used, and I will come to an end in 1 minute, that yes, that's my alarm, so I will finish now. That words or screams or noises have to be interpreted, and patriarchy has usually been interpreting the screams of women in labor as irrational, while we might and we can challenge that assumption and that interpretation. And then we would be doing a different type of logos of Genos. So to end, if any of you is interested, we have the following 4 activities from now till the next month, and everyone is welcome. So we have a hybrid event with one of the people in the audience, with Sarah Cohen in Oxford on the 2nd of May. Registration is open. We will be talking about birth, perspectives in feminist philosophy. And then these other events, the Philosophy of Birth Network, to be launched on the 5th of July, also hybrid event. Everyone welcome to join the network, and a couple of other conferences coming soon. Thank you, and sorry to talk a couple of minutes longer. Thank you very much.